Hello and welcome to Bow Beats. So in this episode of Making a Sound with Bow, we're going to try and make some really fat sounding bass sounds using the Novation Circuit. Now before that we need to have the new and quite insane sip of the coffee. So in this episode I will go over some nice tips and tricks for using the Novation Circuit in order to get some great bass sounds. I will also show you how to build one, and I will show you some cool examples. And if you stick around to the end, there will be a really cool little jam with a bass patch. If you haven't seen the previous episodes of Making Sounds with Bow, as well as my circuit editor tutorials and some other videos, I'll leave a little link here so you can just click it and save it for later. So let's get to it. Alright, so where do we start off? Well, I'd like to start off with some general tips and tricks. It's not something that really is exclusive to the circuit's editor or the circuit's sound. You could probably do this on most synthesizers. The first thing here is waveforms matters. You see, it's very easy to just go through any waveform and thinking everything makes for a good bass patch, but I think that you really have to listen, especially when it comes to the circuit. Listen to the waveforms, listen to the oscillators, and hear what works, what doesn't work, what has a lot of body, what has not a lot of body. Now the second thing I'd like to teach you is to think about the filter drive as sort of magic. You see, when you turn the filter drive up, something happens to the sound, and even a mediocre sounding waveform really comes to life. So I really think you should use the filter drive frequently when you try to make a bass patch. So let's get into the software and let me show you how I use the filter drive and how I use the different waveforms in order to pick something and make something that sounds nice as a bass, or bass if you like fish. Anyway, so let's get into the software. So first off, we need to check the oscillator 1 here. And what I usually do is that I use oscillator 1 or 2 as a sort of base. Not a bass sound, but a base, a foundation upon which I build the sound. So I have to pick something that feels really bassy. If we go into oscillator 1, you can see we have a sawtooth. But I do prefer the sine. If we turn down a couple of octaves. And like most sine waves, it has this kind of round feeling to it, which makes it a really good foundation for a bass sound. So wave 0 works really nice as a bass. The triangle sounds pretty good. The sawtooth, you can almost already hear that on the same octave, if we turn it down to the sine, there's a definite change in bass tonality. Now if we scroll through the waveforms, you will hear that some of them aren't all that great for bass sounds. So the triangle, the sawtooth, different saw sounds. As you can hear, when we come up here, 7, 8, 9, so as you can hear, when we moved through them, it went from pretty bassy to a bit more of the mid frequencies to the high frequencies, and this really impacts how heavy the bass can be. This is of course different from different types of synthesizers. So if I do this on my Sub 37 Moog, a lot of the waveforms will have more bass to them than the circuit. It's just different technology behind it. So on oscillator 1, we'll pick the Tri-Saw. And I'll just play something here. So the first thing I want to add, just to show you what happens, is the magic behind the filter drive. So let me just choose it here on macro number 4, and we'll go down here to filter drive, and we'll increase depth to maximum. Now, if I play this and increase macro knob number 4 here, you will hear the filter drive come into play. But rather than the diode type that we got going on here, I like the valve type. So what you want to do now is you want to add the filter frequency and filter resonance as macro knobs as well. Let's see here. Let's add another oscillator, and when I add a second oscillator to a bass sound, I'm looking for something to give the bass even more character. And you don't have to turn it up all the way in the mixer, you can just keep it at a lower level. So let me just turn oscillator 2 up here and we can hear what it does, and I'll turn down the filter drive as well. As you can hear, when I added the sawtooth and I added filter drive, I felt like there was this lack of energy. So let me just try a different waveform here. So I think I'll go with this talky something oscillator waveform. I'm not really sure what it's supposed to be, but anyway. Alright, so now we've added the magic of the filter drive to give the sound more character. And we've also explored using different waveforms in order to accomplish something that feels a bit bassy. Now I want to take a look at some other things you can do in the editor just to make the sound a bit fatter. What we can do now is we can add a little bit of noise to the sound, just a little bit. So I'll add 10. It's not little, but you can hear the difference. Or if we add more, you can really hear that this adds something, a character to the sound, but we don't want so much, so we'll turn it down and just add a little bit, a smidge, like 10 or something, or 8. Just a little bit. Now, what you could do if you want to is you could use, for example, envelope number 3 here in the editor, the envelope here, and send it to mod matrix 1 here. And then, for example, use envelope 3 to affect, say, filter frequency or resonance. That's something that's quite interesting. But on this sound that we've got going on here, it doesn't really do that much. So what I'll do is I load some of my other sounds that are a bit more interesting, and we can check them out and see how I've used the mod matrix and other tools in order to make more interesting bass patches. So stay with me. So we'll load another bass patch, and I think I will use my practical bass here as an example. I'll load it. So this bass is really interesting. If I turn the cutoff up here, here's the frequency. We can also increase the amp release, and we can add filter drive. This is a really fat sounding bass. And what we have here is that we have a sine oscillator as the bass, and I really like to have that as the sort of foundation of the sound. And then we have this one, and I'm not really sure. It's I think it's the last one, as you can see here. I'm not really sure what kind of waveform it is, but it added some interesting harmonics to the sound. And then we have macro knob number 1, filter frequency, macro knob number 2, we have filter resonance, then we have amp release, and then we have filter drive. Like I told you, the magic is the filter drive. And then we have some interesting things here. So let me just play you the sound, and I'll introduce macro knobs number 5, 6, as well as, well, 7, and 7 isn't all that interesting, but perhaps 8 is. So macro knob number 5 here increases the detuning by cents. So it's not a huge detuning, but it does something interesting to the sound. And if we use macro knob number 6 instead, you will hear something quite different. So macro knob number 1 actually sends to the mod matrix, and it sends the LFO1, the plus 1, sends to the oscillator 1 V-sync. And macro knob number 8 introduces some more oscillator 1 V-sync depth, as well as the LFO2 rate. So increases the LFO2 rate, and we can just check that out if you want to as well. But all in all, if we turn these down, this is a pretty beast bass. And increasing the filter drive really hammers down this point of a nail that you need to use the filter drive. So the next sound I want to show you is called Funky Slippery. So let's check it out. So the Funky Slippery is sort of more of an electric guitar sound, but with some interesting mod matrix twists and LFO twists to the sound, and we can check it out. It sounds something like. So it's sort of a funky sound, but the interesting things start to happen when you play longer notes. So here's some long notes. And let me now introduce you to the macro knobs. Macro knob number 6 affects the LFO1 slew rate, which sort of slows down the LFO. And then we can introduce mod matrix number 2 via the number 8 macro knob here. And this mod matrix on the slot number 2 here goes from LFO2 to the noise level. So it impacts the noise level, as well as an interesting thing here. It also, when you turn up the macro knob number 8, it also increases the noise level. So it both affects the noise, modulates the noise, as well as increases the noise. So as you can hear, you can make some really interesting stuff with this sort of patch. So with this patch, I was hoping to show you that you can make something that sounds pretty decent as a bass sound, and add a lot of variation to the sound and how to use the sound in a sort of a live setting using the mod matrix and the LFOs. So I haven't gone into depth exactly what the LFO and so on are doing, but I'll leave the sounds as downloads, so just check the description. So the next bass sound I want to show you, I call the knorr bass. A knorr is a Swedish word. It's sort of the shape of the pig's tail. It has a knorr. So now you know. And the knorr bass sounds like this. What we got going on here is a sine wave that I use as a foundation, and then we have the saw wave, the one we used in the first example where I showed you some of the tricks. And we have the same layout here with the filter frequency, the filter resonance, and we have the amp release, the filter drive. Then we have mod matrix 1, mod matrix 2, chorus level, and distortion level. And the mod matrix number 1 depth here goes to the velocity and envelope 3 that affects the filter frequency. And the mod matrix 2 depth goes into velocity and envelope 2 filter frequency and into the resonance. If I look a bit warm, it's because I have these lamps here and they are really bright and sort of gives off quite a bit of warmth. So I'm feeling a bit sweaty. So with my examples, I hope to show you that waveforms does matter. It matters greatly. Be careful which you pick and use the mixer in order to sort of, just get decent levels. Use one waveform as a sort of foundation and put another one on top in order to give the sound more character. You have to use the filter drive. And then you can add some EQ as well, and you can add other things to shape the sound. Be careful with the resonance and with chorus and so on, because it can sound good but take away sort of the power of the bass. So just be a bit mindful. Use mod matrix in order to create interesting LFOs that influence, for example, filter frequency or resonance, or you could use it to, for example, use an envelope number 3, or use the filter envelope, or just the amp envelope in order to influence the filter frequency or filter drive or the resonance. Just give it a try, and try to see what you can make, because you can really make some interesting sounds. So lastly, before we end today, I'd like to play you a little jam that I made using a bass patch, and I also added a little bit of a lead sound to it. So I hope you really like these videos. If you do, slap a like on it, consider subscribing, share the video. If you have any comments, just put them down below. So this was Bo over on Bo Beats, and I hope to catch you in the next video. So stay tuned. And here comes a little jam.